primarily today, I want us to explore kind of what's the role of design in the space of emerging technology. I'll first explain a bit kind of where my thinking comes from and what I do. And then I want us to look at what pulls emerging technology apart from established technology, why the future of any technology essentially is pretty uncertain, and how we can use design to deal with that. Let's talk a bit about who I am and why should you care about what I have to say. I was growing up in Slovenia in the 90s. My family had one computer, and every month we got this magazine, which is called Joker, which came with a CD that had kind of free games to try out, which was a heaven for a kid like me. But the thing was that the playability was quite limited. So it kind of started to annoy me fairly quickly. Then one month we got this game, which is called Revolt, which is a very simple game. You were like racing around with remote control cars. I loved it, but the thing was that you could only race with a single type of a vehicle, and it got really old really soon. One day I was kind of alone at home with no usual supervision, and I kind of decided to try to make it a bit more fun for me and my friends. To be honest, I didn't really have any idea what I was doing, but I started to fiddle around with the file system. So I started kind of renaming files, copying things around, and rerunning the game and see what's going to happen. And after a few attempts, surprisingly, something happened. I was able to play any car in the game, and don't really ask me how, because I still don't exactly know, but it worked. So the cool thing is that I think I learned three main things here. Is that I was able to influence, and I want to influence what we could do with computers. I learned that I can only really do it by being very hands-on, by accessing the technology. And also I learned that I don't need to be an expert in engineering in that specific field to be able to do it. There are other ways to access it. Another game that we got was called, I think it was called Stunt Drive. And yeah, we played a lot of random racing games. But the funny thing was that I was more interested in a lot of other aspects, more than the actual racing in these games. So what was immensely powerful about Stunt Drive is that they included a very simple tool that let you create new tracks for anyone to race on. So suddenly, we as kids were able to kind of use our imagination to extend the game in a very simple way and create new things for other people. So here I learned that we all have the power to make things, and that we can design the tools that enable everyone to do so. So then years later, when I was studying, I discovered that essentially the way that we design things for people influences how then those same people behave and the kind of actions that they take. I learned that, as designers, we have great potential, but also great responsibility to shape the future of the world. So yeah, today I like to sit kind of between design and technology, and I lean on both to shape meaningful experiences for people that use it. So I'm interested in technology that can change the world. In this, I'm kind of really want to empower the people to be able to do it. I want to give the people the agency to do it. And as Katerina mentioned, I'm currently head of design at Arrival. So Arrival is a zero tech company that focuses on zero emission mobility solutions. So we're inventing a lot of things from scratch, and we're using technology to invent those things. So I'm responsible, or like our teams are responsible for kind of all the design and engineering tools that help create these solutions. I do have to say I have the luxury, and I'm extremely glad that I'm able to work next to scientists and engineers that are researching really groundbreaking technology. Yeah, I understand that not everybody has that, but this definitely helps with making technology more accessible to me. And then previously I was at IDEO, a global design company, where I worked across different industries and technologies to help shape user-centered strategies, products and services. So the thing is that most of the things that I do now, or we did in the past, is confidential. So I can't talk about the details of what we're doing, but I'm hoping that I can convey how we approach things and how we're thinking things, and hope that's going to be useful as well. All right, let's stop talking about me and talk a little bit about what is emerging technology. This is what it very often looks like. It's research papers. It's complicated, very complex kind of titles explaining something very in a way, very, very complex. And so essentially, often this is what's accessible to us when we talk about emerging technology, us kind of non-expert, wider audience. If you're not a scientist working on this, this is what you get. According to Wikipedia, emerging technologies are technologies whose development, practical applications, or both are still largely unrealized. In other words, it's technology that hasn't really been fully applied to real world situations well enough for it to be useful, joyful, or sustainable. What I mean here is that we haven't really managed to make a meaningful connection between what the technology can do and what the world needs. Wikipedia also says that it challenges the status quo. It's capable of challenging the status quo. Let's look at the iPhone, right? In 2009, Apple introduced it, and it caused quite a stir. It was revolutionary in so many ways. But what was really interesting about it, that it wasn't really, most of it wasn't really new technology, but they managed to apply it in a new way, apply it to the world, to the real world problems. But then what's even more interesting is that with the second generation, they added this new piece of technology. They added the GPS. So you were finally able to see yourself on a map. And of course, first thing you think, I don't need my clunky GPS device anymore. I can throw it away. I can do now kind of turn-by-turn navigation on my phone. But what this technology actually enabled is not just how you get from point A to point B and helping you do that, which most GPS devices do, but you are now able to locate an internet-enabled device anywhere at any time. This one chip essentially enabled location-based services. With it, a whole new way how we experience the world, but also it created new industries like Uber, Tinder, Deliveroo. There's all the kind of things that almost, they are completely unique in this world, and they wouldn't be able to exist if our mobile devices wouldn't be able to do this. The single new chip invented or allowed whole new industries to emerge. I know I'm using very big words, but like it really feels that emerging technology has the potential to fundamentally change the world that we live in, which puts a lot of responsibility on those who attempt to leverage it, such as designers, for example. So yeah, let's look at a little bit what the world says in what is emerging today. So you mentioned quite a few that you see are here, maybe even elaborated in a bit more detail. But yeah, so for anyone who doesn't know the hype cycle, so this is something that comes from Gartner that helps us evaluate. It's one tool that helps us evaluate how mature technology is. What it gives a view on how high are the market expectations for a given technology in a given moment. So this is for year 2020. And then how those expectations are expected to evolve over time. What we see here, for example, is what's starting to emerge is, for example, I don't know, AI-assisted design, self-supervised learning, like some things that are starting to get some traction. Something that's very hyped, it's at the top of the peak, is, for example, social distancing technologies, which for obvious reasons, I mean, we're having this session remote. For obvious reasons that there's a lot of people trying to do something with it. And for example, ontologies and graphs is something that is only slowly starting to become useful, even though it feels already kind of trendy if you're following those things. But okay, those are technologies, and we can put them on a map, and we can try and understand how developed they are. But how do we really know which one will make a difference? And how do we know that it's going to be a positive difference? It's going to, turn the world into a better place. To understand the future, we can look at a few examples from our history and kind of try and understand what if we can learn something from that to see how we think about the future. So I want us to kind of first look at one of the most basic pieces of technologies that ever emerged, a rock, right? It was just sitting there for millions of years, and then thousands of years ago, people decided to pick it up. And they started using their imagination to do something with it. They invented new tools that helped them feed themselves. They were able to build shelter, protect themselves from other predators. Many things, many wonderful things that kind of pushed humanity. But it also helped kill other people. There's the other side, right? So is this a technology that was worth pursuing? is it right that we pursued this and we created tools out of rock, or is it wrong because now you're able to kill people? Essentially, we learned how to kill people out of that. For all good, there can be found bad use, right? So it's really hard to know whether it's going to go good or bad. So let's go look at another technology. For example, the printing press. It came, Gutenberg kind of brought it to our attention in the 15th century. Then essentially what happened is that producing a book became much more accessible, which led to drastic democratization in the knowledge, and because suddenly many more people would be exposed to new information. I mean, Gutenberg actually went broke because he invented this beautiful thing, but he was initially met with a lot of resistance from the so-called kind of old way of doing things, right? So, for example, those that were at that point copying information, so the scribes, they feared that they're going to lose their business, so they resisted. Those that were controlling information, they felt that they're going to lose power because they won't be able to control information as much anymore. Both of those kind of concerns were valid, and it inevitably happened, but were really those near-term concerns valid enough to drop the technology? Or did we as a society at large benefit on the long run? Again, at that point, was this technology something that was worth pursuing? And how do we know how it's going to kind of affect the world? And it's also always hard to say it's only going to affect it in a positive way, because there's so many different facets attached to something that's so groundbreaking to the world. The thing is that what we notice is, people have bright imaginations, and those imaginations will inevitably find a way to misuse or reject any kind of technology. Like, people will find a way to use it for something that benefits their value system. Whatever that value system is, whether you agree with it or not, people will try and bring technology into that. So how can we know, again, whether we can change the world for the better or for the worse with a given technology? I think we need to reframe the question. Like, it's not about which technology will change the world, which is the right one that we need to choose, but it's really about how can we better deal with the uncertainty that comes around it. So how might we learn to tame it? So Lawrence Cook is a head of computational engineering in our team, and he says that in academia, when you're researching new ideas, you're often pushed to come up with something new and then prove and keep proving that that's the right thing. But in these areas that we're talking about now, when there's so many unknowns, we really need to be challenging ourselves, our own assumptions all the time, constantly. Nothing is certain, and we need to be okay with that. While technology often emerges from academic practices, and it results in research papers for obvious good reasons, for us to really stabilize technology, we can lean on modern design and on modern software practices. So what happens here is that by kind of acquiring a design mindset, we're able to continuously explore what's the impact on the world of a given technology. And with a software mindset, we can always kind of rapidly adjust how it's applied to the world when we need it. So we're able to explore, and we're able to adjust what we're doing to the new reality of the world and to what we learn. So it's not about convincing everyone that you have the right thing, or kind of trying to shoehorn its use into something that can only be used in one way. But it's rather about being able to learn and to respond to that learning as soon as possible. And the great thing is that, teams that are shipping digital products are really good at it. But this is not exclusive to digital products. We can build other things, but we can use the design, the software mindset to be able to move at a similar pace and get these benefits. How can designers help? I'm not going to talk too much about software because there's other bigger experts for sure than me that know that. But I do want to touch a little bit on, what are the kind of strengths that designers have, right? We have our mindset, we have our methods, we have our tools, and we can use this to support product teams or service teams in applying this new technology in a much more meaningful way. So if we go back to the hype cycle, like we can use this kind of maps to evaluate our approach, our design approach. Because essentially what we want is we want to move towards long-term impact. But if we just design the thing, it won't enable that. So we like that's anybody that's worked with emerging technology knows that's an impossible task. Just design the thing, for all the reasons that I mentioned before. So to really find the right approach, we can use this kind of maps to try and understand what's going on with the given technology, and then kind of understand what are the kind of methods or tools that we could use to support that technology. So here's the three things that you can do with whatever technology is beloved, is close to your heart, and depending on the situation. So what happens down here when technology first starts to emerge is that it's the least applied to real world problems, and it's often focused on technological value. So we deal with, for example, how to make a more efficient battery, but not really what having such a battery would enable in the world, or how it would affect and change the world. What we can do as designers is we can tell stories about the new world to boost this imagination and to break, to push the thinking outside of this very, very kind of constrained box. So, but the challenge here is that, exploring new applications is hard because potential users, I mean, they might not even exist. Engineers, scientists, designers, all of them, they use a different language. So they don't really know how to talk about that future world in the same way. So we can't really bring our own unique perspectives to the table, and we can involve the users. What we focus on and how we talk about those things varies wildly. So there's very little chance for dialogue. But the thing is that we can all kind of collectively, we always have told stories, and we were able to understand stories. History has proven that over and over again. And, there's always a way to tell a story where the other person will be able to understand what you mean. And the thing is that designers, we're natural storytellers. It's really what we do best. And it's the greatest skill that we can kind of bring to the table. So just as an example, what we did internally is that our product teams are so diverse in their backgrounds, in their expertise, that we were really struggling to find a common vision. Not to find one, but actually to share one. As an exercise, what we started doing is we started writing short stories about a future world that will be enabled by our technology. Everyone, like different perspectives. There was computational engineers, there was product managers, there was designers, there was software engineers. All of them kind of tried to write something short and sweet from their own perspective about this world. And through that, we actually were able to start inventing kind of new jobs that would exist in this future world. We started to describe new processes of how things could work. For the first time, we're actually able to articulate the benefits for users and for the company. So we moved beyond the technology itself, but tried to think, what does that enable? What does that allow? What kind of wonderful world could we live in the future? What's great about this format is that, it positions everyone in real world situations. It's very easy to get detached from the real world, but a format of a simple story like this forces you to be somewhere. What's really nice also that it puts it from a perspective of those who will be using it. We change the focus from the technology to the people and how those people interact with the technology instead. And it also lets you talk about consequences and impact. So not just about how amazing the thing is, how is then tomorrow better or next year better? And, how are we actually changing the world on a longer run, and not just, how do we make something technologically really amazing? So then as we kind of climb this hype curve, gradually everything seems possible. The thing at the peak, right, there's the most interest in a given technology. With that comes the most investment. So there's the most kind of activity in exploring new applications. And we're starting to understand some real world contexts, like how this could be applied, what that could mean. And we kind of need to start articulating what are the main kind of paradigms behind this technology. But there's definitely like an abundance of ideas that's there, and we need to somehow navigate that space. In order to really navigate that potential, we need to make design tools for this new world. Like we have our established design tools that we use for example, user interface design. All those tools, they are here now because, the internet started 20, 30, whatever kind of years ago. So it took a while before we got to Figma. And before how we were designing websites was very, very different. What we need to do is we need to make those loops shorter, so we don't wait 30 years now for the next Figma, for this new technology, but we try to make it much more accessible, much quicker, much sooner. So the problem here is that we have ideas for new applications, but very little tools to explore the boundaries of what the technology is capable of, but or what the parameters are that we can control as designers or as users. So we need to work closer to the medium that we're inventing. A really beautiful project is Teachable machine from Google, where they essentially built this to make machine learning more accessible. And they provided this tool, which is not a product, and it doesn't really let you do the final thing, but it lets you explore how the technology works. So you can collect a bunch of data in different ways, using your webcam, using your microphone, whatever, to then kind of train the model to classify things. And then you can export that model and use it kind of anywhere. And you can do all of that without ever leaving your browser. Like you just enter a URL and it's all there. You don't need to have any expertise, right? So until then, I mean, anybody has ever worked with, for example, machine learning knows that there's things you need to have in place to be able to work with it efficiently. It's getting much easier thanks to tools like this, but there's a path, there's a journey. What's really great about this tool is that it gives very hands-on access to technology, and you can try. You start to understand what are the underlying concepts. For machine learning, you need a bunch of data. You know that you can label that data. You know that then the algorithm can then start classifying things based on how you describe what the world looks like. Like you start to understand some of these concepts behind it, but you're not an expert in that technology, but you're still able to explore applications. I hope I made it clear how important these tools are to kind of democratize who has a say in building in what we build and what the future should be. It's not a product in itself, but it's a design tool. After we've been trying to do something with the technology for a while, reality kicks in, right? We start to see that there's technological constraints, there's rejection from the world, there's lack of legislature, lack of policy, whatever, but there's real world constraints that start kind of bogging everything down, and they kill most of the ideas, right? There's a lot of skepticism, more and more skepticism, and we kind of need to focus on proving, there is some value in this for the technology to survive. But if we look on the user side, they can, the attention span is very low, and if you're not excited about technology, why would you go through the pain trying to use it if there's no clear benefit on the other side? So what we can do as designers is that we don't think about the end solution, and we don't only create that beautiful, final, most applied, amazing thing. We already discussed earlier why that's impossible anyway. How we can support gaining trust is to really design for this transition intentionally, because getting to this new reality, it often takes so much time and effort that waiting for it to be ready could destroy any potential that it might have. So we need to start building something now. Looking at our users, we can start hinting at something they can start using today, and then we can build a relationship over time, and they grow trust over time, and then we slowly add new functionality. So take the user on a journey. Don't just kind of design. Don't just give them the final thing, because that will never work. I know I keep repeating that, but it's a really important point. Does anyone know what this is? There's actually a bit of a hint. I mean, Mario, yeah, it doesn't really matter, but it's so Super Mario. Again, I go back to video games. What's really, really exciting, interesting here is that they designed this. They designed Mario in the 80s, and the first level that they actually designed it on grid paper. They were thinking through the levels. I mean, it's crazy. if you try doing this, how much you start thinking about the details of the level once you're constrained by this design tool, essentially. But what they really mastered in level design was that they were able to explain the complexity of the world to the player in the simplest possible way. Just gonna show you how this works.
なんかまあ何か出てきたら避けるでしょうってこうでなんかハテナってついてるので叩くだろうねって言って叩くとコインって言って嬉しいので次のハテナをコインって叩くと出てくる。いやーって逃げようと思ったら当たってしまうと。で当たってしまったつもりが大きくなったっていうのでここでものすごく嬉しくなる。でこうなると突然こうボンボンボンってこう潰せるので嬉しくなって。でここで大体マリオがどんなゲームかが分かる。
Yeah, so in Super Mario, in level 1, in the first 10 seconds in the game, you learn about all the constraints of the world, right? And after that, you can be confident that you can play any level, even if the levels and the enemies change, the game mechanics stay the same. So, they were able to teach the user everything about the world without the user needing to have the whole world in front of them, because all the levels are coming later, but they already understand how it's going to work, right? So when you think about AI, VR, and those kind of technologies, when we're creating these new worlds that are enabled by some technology, users need to learn how it works, and they need to understand what it can or cannot do. And they need to have a say in how that should change in the future. As designers, what you can do, you can tell stories to boost the imagination. You can make design tools to navigate this limitless potential. And you can design for transition to gain trust and really make technology, a specific piece of technology, successful. That's it. As a little exercise, let's try something. I want everyone to try and tell a story about a specific piece of technology, whatever it is. By telling a story, I mean write one paragraph, like I don't know, like let's say one paragraph, a very short paragraph. Pick a technology, pick a space and time, add some characters in that, some people, and create a situation. So it could be, VR in space with kind of whatever long distance relationship between two people. Okay, and then create a story around it, right? If you need some ideas for emerging technologies, we can again go back to the kind of this hype cycle. Pick something. I mean, even if you don't know exactly what it is, maybe the words are inspiring and make something out of that. But don't think too much. Just try and pick a technology, apply it to the world, and write a paragraph about it. This is me. Thank you, everyone.